The Phillies fired Joe Girardi. Was this the appropriate move, and what more needs to be done in order for the Phillies to turn this season around? Also, I'll take a look at some potential candidates that the Phillies may hire to replace Girardi, including current interim manager Rob Thomson. And finally, I asked you guys on my Instagram for some Philly sports reactions, and I'll classify them as overreactions, underreactions, or spot on. The second episode of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel starts right now. What's going on, everybody, and welcome into the second edition of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel. I am your host, Jordan Hirsch. Now, guys, before we get into this video and podcast, if you're here from the YouTube side, please like this video and subscribe with notifications turned on. And if you are here from the podcast side, please share this podcast with anybody and everybody who you think would want to listen. Now, I just do want to apologize real quick for not being able to get an episode out. Last week, I ran into some technical problems, so that is why there was nothing out last Saturday, but we are back. Now, guys, of course, the big news of the week this week is that the Phillies fired manager Joe Girardi. Now, this is a move that I think, quite frankly, needed to be done. The Phillies did need, I think, a different voice in that locker room. At the time, they were 22-29. They were falling very quickly in the standings. They were closer to the worst team in the league, that being the Kansas City Royals, than they were to the final wildcard spot in the National League. And, of course, not all that falls on the manager, but a large chunk of it certainly did in this case. Whether it be Joe Girardi's decision to leave Nick Nelson in the game last Tuesday against the Braves when the Phillies had taken that 5-4 lead in the ninth, or pushing all starters back so Bailey Falter can come in and suck against the Mets, or pitching to Jock Peterson for absolutely no reason with an open base in the 11th inning against the Giants last Tuesday. I mean, the decision-making by Girardi was just awful at times this season, and I do think the Phillies needed a fresh voice in the locker room, and they get that. They get Rob Thomson, and they came out and certainly proved that point right last night, scoring 10 runs, 9 of them on 5 home runs, 2 by Harper, 2 by Schwarber, and Bryson Stott's first as a big leaguer, as the Phillies have now won 2 consecutive games. They're now 2-0 in June, and they are back up to 6 games under 500 at 23-29. Now, these last 2 games have certainly softened the blow on what was a really rough week for the Phillies. They finished the week at 2-4, losing Saturday up in New York 8-2. They held a 2-1 lead in that game, losing 5-4 in 10 innings to the Mets on Sunday. They held a 4-3 lead in that game, sensing a theme here. On Monday, the Phillies lose the game to the Giants 5-4. They held a 2-0 lead there, and then they lose 7-4 to the Giants on Tuesday, and in that game, they also held a lead. So all 4 of the Phillies' losses this week come when they hold leads, which means they blew all 4 games, and certainly at least 3 of them were winnable. I mean, the game on Saturday, you lose 8-2. That's kind of whatever. They held a 2-1 lead, and the Mets offense really just came alive after that. But obviously, you got to win that game on Sunday. Nick Castellanos hits a 3-run home run to give the Phillies the lead in the 8th inning. And then Corey Knebel comes in the bottom of the 9th, and on the first pitch, gives up the first major league hit to Nick Plummer. And of course, it's a home run. Mets tie that game, go on to win it in the 10th. The Phillies then obviously lose the game on Memorial Day 5-4. Kyle Schwarber, a huge home run to come back and tie that game in the bottom of the 9th. After Evan Longoria gave the Giants the lead in the top half, the Phillies end up then losing that in the 10th inning with Andrew Bellotti, one of these middle relievers who have been absolutely awful for the Phillies this season, come in and given up an absolute 2-run shot to Curt Casali. The Phillies then get the lead on Tuesday night, end up blowing it there. They do nearly come back in that game. Bottom of the 10th, Alec Boehm gets a base hit off the second base bag with 2 outs to tie the game. Everything's looking good then, 4-4. Phillies look like they might be able to come back and finally win a game that they're supposed to. And then Joe Girardi elects to pitch to Jock Peterson. He goes deep. That makes it 7-4, and the game is then out of reach. After that game, the Phillies did make some moves. Jean Segura was placed on the 10-day IL, and he's going to be transferred to the 60-day IL. I assume, because he's going to be out 10 to 12 weeks recovering from surgery that he had yesterday on his fractured finger, and now he's going to be out until at least late August. Obviously a huge loss, however, As part of that, the Phillies call up Nick Maton, and Nick Maton comes on and provides an absolutely huge and much needed spark for the Phillies. 3 RBIs, including a huge 2-run home run in the 6th, and the Phillies' 6-5 win over the Giants to salvage that series. Phillies also called up Christopher Sanchez as part of that move. Christopher Sanchez comes in and absolutely deals in the 7th inning of that game on Wednesday night. He puts up a 1-2-3 inning in what was an absolutely amazing job by the bullpen. 37 pitches, 25 strikes, 9 up, 9 down. That is exactly how it is supposed to be. Roman Quinn was also DFA'd by the Phillies after that game. He will now have 7 days for another team to try to sign him. If they do not, then he will be optioned to AAA. So Joe Girardi gets fired, and the Phillies immediately, and I mean immediately, come out and show some fight. How about on the first pitch they see? Kyle Schwarber, a long 432-foot solo home run last night. It was one of 5 home runs that the Phillies hit. Schwarber hit 2, Harp hit 2, and Bryson Stott hit his first as a big leaguer. The Phillies win it 10-0 yesterday. They're back to 23-29. They've won 2 straight. Are the Phillies turning it around? And if there was ever a time for the Phillies to turn around, it would be now. They finish up this series against the struggling Angels, who have lost 9 straight. They'll play them tonight and tomorrow. Then they're off Monday, and then they're going to play 14 games in 13 days. However, 3 of those games are against the Brewers, and then the next 10 are 3 against the Diamondbacks at home, 3 against the Marlins at home, and then 4 down in Washington. Remember, we still have not played the Nationals this season. The Nationals are in the basement in the NL East, and the Phillies still have 19 games against them. So the schedule is certainly lighter going forward. In fact, after the Brewers series is over, they only have 1 more series the entire month against a team that is over 500, that being in the San Diego Padres. The other 2 series this month are going to be against the Rangers in Texas and then against the Braves in Philly, 2 teams that are under 500 currently. And so if the Phillies are going to want to turn it around, they're going to need to get hot in this stretch, and they're going to need to get hot going into this stretch, because that may take a little bit of the pressure off, because we know that this team, at least last season, had a lot of trouble beating the teams that they were supposed to beat. They've now won 2 straight. They have 5 more games in this gauntlet that is late April through the beginning of June. And the Phillies, I mean, they played with a ton of energy yesterday. So I do think that if they are going to turn it around, it is going to be right now. Because, I mean, it's first of all, it's going to have to be. And second of all, this team looks totally different. I mean, they look like an absolutely, totally different team yesterday than they did earlier in this week. They looked like they were playing with absolutely zero fight, zero intensity. I mean, you saw images of the guys in the dugout. Even after we had tied the game up in the 10th inning on Tuesday, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Rhys Hoskins, kind of still all hanging their head like, oh no, here we go again. We're going to come back and still lose. But yesterday, they came out and played with intensity. I mean, it seemed like every ball in the air was going out. Kyle Schwarber, on his home runs, was really showing some really cool energy with our third base coach, Dusty Rothman. He was rounding the bases. The handshake line, the guys seemed fired up. And why shouldn't they be? They just won 10-0. That was easily the best game of the season yesterday. 10-0 win against the Angels. It was really fun to watch. Zach Eflin goes 8 innings. I thought he should have gone back out there in the 9th, but Rob Thomson does elect to go with James Norwood in the 9th, and he has a 1-2-3 inning. So about Rob Thomson, the players really do seem to like him. He's been here since 2018, so he's been here through Gabe Kapler, and he's been here now through Joe Girardi. Rob Thomson is a guy that certainly probably should have had a managerial job a long time ago. I know Joe Girardi said that on MLB Network Radio yesterday, and he's right about that. I mean, this is his 38th season, I believe, in baseball, and he has never been a manager, and he's certainly been on some winning teams. He certainly has proven that he has what it takes, most likely, to manage a Major League Baseball team, just has never been given the opportunity until right now. And, I mean, he managed the game pretty well yesterday. I mean, obviously, he didn't have to do a whole lot because Zach Eflin was dealing, the Phillies' offense was going berserk. But he certainly looked like a guy who is ready for this challenge ahead. Thompson's resume certainly does back that up. He was a minor league coach for the Detroit Tigers organization from 1990 to 1998. He was a coach in the Yankees minor league organization. He was then moved to the New York Yankees front office as a director of player development, and then was assigned as bench coach again in 2008 by Joe Girardi, where he had stayed until 2017, until coming over to the Phillies to become their bench coach from 2018 until 2022. So, I mean, I think Rob Thomson is really as good of an interim manager as anybody because of all the experience that he has, and with a relatively inexperienced coaching staff around him, at least major league wise. I think that Rob Thomson is really a great person for the Phillies to have as their leader going forward for this season. So that being said, Rob Thomson does still obviously have the interim tag placed on him. The Phillies will certainly have a managerial search this upcoming offseason. And just some names to look out for. Obviously, Rob Thomson is going to be potentially at the top of that list if he's able to get these Phillies going good and get them into the playoffs. He gets them into the playoffs, I think that he's going to earn the managerial job. But there are certainly a lot of other qualified candidates out there. One of them being Jim Leyland. Jim Leyland has not managed in Major League Baseball since 2011. However, he was with the Detroit Tigers while Dave Dombrowski was there. So those two certainly know each other. He took the Tigers to the World Series in 2010. And I understand that he has not managed in baseball now 11 years. But, I mean, if you look kind of what Tony La Russa is doing with the White Sox, I mean, he hadn't managed in baseball since 2013. He comes back after 8 years, and he gets the White Sox to the playoffs. So, I mean, managers coming out of retirement certainly is probably not necessarily a bad thing, especially for a guy like Jim Leyland, who has done a lot of winning in his career. Another candidate the Phillies may look at is their third base coach, Dusty Wathan. A lot of these guys on the team know Dusty because he was their minor league manager. Dusty Wathan basically moved through the system with a lot of these players while he was in the minor leagues before moving up to the major leagues to become the Phillies' third base coach. So he certainly has managerial experience, albeit in the minor leagues. He, of course, has never managed in the majors. But Dusty Wathan, I think, is certainly a name that the Phillies are going to be looking at. A couple more people that the Phillies may also consider are Jace Tingler, the former manager of the Padres, and Mickey Callaway, the former manager of the New York Mets. Now, of course, neither of these guys were able to get pretty good teams to the playoffs, but they do now have major league managerial experience, and I think that's something that is valued. I'm sure both of them are looking to get back into managing in the big leagues. So those are two names to probably also be on the lookout for. Another guy is the current manager of the Kansas City Royals, Mike Matheny. This is a little bit more of a reach because Mike Matheny did have his 2023 option picked up by Kansas City this past offseason. However, the Royals are right now the worst team in baseball, and I think a lot of people expected them to maybe be a little bit better than where they are right now. They, of course, have some really young talent that they haven't really been able to do much with. So it'll be interesting to see what Kansas City decides to do with Matheny. If he does end up getting fired, he would be a great guy, I think, for the Phillies to try to pursue. Mike Matheny is a World Series champion with the Cardinals. He has done a ton of winning in his career, and he has certainly been around teams with experience and teams with not so much experience. And the Phillies are kind of a mixture of both of those. So I think that Mike Matheny would really be a pretty cool candidate for the Phillies to look into. Speaking of the Royals, another guy that the Phillies may look into is their former manager, Ned Yost. Now, Ned Yost has not managed in the big leagues since 2019 when he did retire. However, again, retired managers aren't necessarily the worst way to go right now, and Ned has only been out of the game for 3 years, and I'm sure the Phillies would like his experience as well. He's another World Series champion, winning the World Series with the Royals, of course, in 2015. So yeah, Ned Yost, definitely another name to watch out for. And finally, the last guy I think the Phillies may have their eye on is current Cincinnati Reds manager David Bell. Bell is certainly struggling right now with the Cincinnati Reds. Now, they have been better, but they got off to a 3-22 start. And I'm sure that Cincinnati, they're definitely looking to go and do a rebuild right now. They kind of tried to come out of their rebuild a couple years ago. That didn't work, and it looks like they've basically decided to tear it all down again. So if they decide to tear it all down, including their manager this offseason, I think David Bell is probably another guy that the Phillies are going to keep an eye on. So getting back into this season, though, if the Phillies are going to want to turn this thing around, they're going to need to clean up really three main things. Number one, of course, being the absolutely terrible disaster of a bullpen. And it's not everybody. Familia's been pretty good. Hand has been outstanding. Sir Anthony's been great. And other than those three, though, I mean, it has just been really a black hole out there. The Phillies' middle relievers have been awful. Andrew Bellotti, who was so good for the first month and a half of the season, he's really been terrible. He's given up home runs now in 3 consecutive appearances. Nick Nelson just has been absolutely terrible. He's been a disgrace. And then, of course, Jose Alvarado, who was sent down to the minors last week. That just goes to show how bad he had been. Another hole the Phillies are going to have to fill is their terrible defense. This team ranks last in defensive runs saved. They rank last in outs above average, and they are 27th in defensive efficiency. So they're really going to need to clean that up. They've showed some really great defense yesterday. Of course, a couple of excellent catches, one by Nick Maton, who did end up having to leave the game with a shoulder sprain because of it. And then Odubel Herrera making an excellent play out and left. Both of those great plays did just happen to be off of Mike Trout, who has really been struggling. He's now 0 for his last 18. And when you're getting robbed by Odubel Herrera and Nick Maton, that's how you know you're not really going all too well. Finally, another thing the Phillies are going to have to clean up is their lack of clutch hitting. The Phillies have been absolutely horrible in clutch situations this year, because the problem this year, at least with the offense, it has not been getting guys on base, it's getting those guys in. Now, to kind of put this in perspective, the Phillies have 0 hits with the bases loaded and nobody out this season. They've scored just 4 runs in those chances, so they need to get better with runners on base and with runners in scoring position, which is something that they did very well in yesterday's game. The Phillies had some clutch hitting with runners on base. They had some clutch 2-out hitting, and all in all, it was just a great all-around game yesterday, and a game that the Phillies are really going to need to bottle, because that game was, I think, a glimpse of what we all kind of expected the Phillies to be this season. A team that is going to have some pretty good starting pitching and offense that is just absolutely going to rake. To preview this upcoming Phillies week, the Phillies are going to take on the Angels tonight at 7:15. That game is exclusively on Fox. It's baseball night in America. Tomorrow's game is going to be at 1:35. You can find that game on NBC Sports Philadelphia and on MLB Network for out-of-market only. The Phillies will then be off on Monday as they travel to Milwaukee. They will take on the Brewers in Milwaukee at 8:10 on NBC Sports Philadelphia on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Thursday's game will be an afternoon game at 2:10, again, NBC Sports Philadelphia. Friday's game at 7:05 against the Diamondbacks is going to be at 7:05. That game will be on NBC 10, and then 4:05 next Saturday, June 11th, NBC Sports Philadelphia against the Diamondbacks. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to get into on this episode was last week I asked you guys for some Philly sports reactions that I will now classify as overreactions, underreactions, or spot on. Now, a couple of these reactions are that the Phillies need to fire Joe Girardi. Of course, these were sent in last week. I was unable to get a video out last week. So, clearly those two were very spot on because the Phillies end up firing Joe Girardi. Anyways, so one of them is that Garrett Stubbs is better than JT Realmuto. This season, I think that is probably a slight overreaction. Garrett Stubbs has been fantastic, but Realmuto has been better these last couple of weeks. Hopefully, he's coming around. He would be a much needed piece of this offense to get going. Another reaction is that the Phillies should trade Didi Gregorius. Right now, again, probably a slight overreaction just because they don't really have much of an option at shortstop. If they do end up moving on from Gregorius this season, Bryson Stott has struggled, and he needs consistent playing time. And then Johan Camargo, of course, he's a good player, but I'm not necessarily sure he's the answer or that he's going to be better than Gregorius. And the final reaction that you guys sent in was one that I feel like I'm going to be having to answer every week this summer, and it's that, of course, the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl this season. We need to chill with this. It is June 4th. We're still over a month and a half away from OTAs. Preseason doesn't start till August. The regular season doesn't start for another more than 3 months. Could this team go to the Super Bowl? Yes, they could, but this is definitely an overreaction right now. This team has not proven anything on the field, and I think we are all definitely very excited for this Eagles season. and hopefully the team that they have on paper is going to be the team that comes out on the field every Sunday. But to say they're going to the Super Bowl in June, I do think is an overreaction. Call me a hater all you want, but this team has not played a single game together on the field quite yet, so I don't think you can definitively say, oh, we're going to the Super Bowl. They're definitely going to be a good team this season. Like I said in my last episode, I do have them being 11-6 and in the playoffs, but the Super Bowl right now might be a little bit of a stretch. All right, so that's going to wrap things up for the second edition of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel. Again, if you're coming here from the YouTube side, please like this video and subscribe with notifications turned on. And if you're here from the podcast side, please share this episode with anybody and everybody who you think would want to listen. You guys can also follow me on Instagram at Philly Sports Spot. That's PhillySportSpot, just one S in between sport and spot. I will link that in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to episode 2 of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel. If you're here from the YouTube side and would just like to listen to future episodes, you could find me on Spotify. And if you are here from the podcast side and would like to watch future episodes, you could find me on YouTube. Both those channels are Philly Sports Spot. Episode 3 will be out next Saturday. I post every week, so be sure to tune in next Saturday for that. Until then, have a good weekend, everybody.